Picture this. A man sits alone at his kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. He's 61. He has a cup of coffee in front of him, steam rising. He's not scrolling his phone. He's not watching the news. He's just sitting there, looking out at the yard, and he's smiling. Not because something funny happened, not because he's hiding something, just because the morning is quiet and the quiet feels good, and for the first time in a long time, he doesn't feel like he should be doing something else. That man used to be terrified of silence. Now he schedules it. Something shifted, and this video is about what that shift actually is, where it comes from, and whether it's something to honour or something to be worried about. Let's start with an honest distinction, because this matters. When we talk about older men in their 50s, 60s, sometimes 70s, stepping back from romantic relationships, from the pursuit of partnership, from the noise and friction of intimate life, there are at least 4 very different things that phrase can mean. It can mean loneliness dressed up as preference. It can mean avoidance masquerading as wisdom. It can mean genuine depression, a flatness that's been quietly mistaken for contentment. Or it can mean something real, a sincere, considered reorganization of what a man wants his remaining decades to look like. Only one of those is peace. The others are counterfeits. This video isn't a celebration of isolation. It's not a guide to building walls or closing yourself off from the world. Men who withdraw completely, who stop maintaining friendships, who lose interest in things they used to love, who sit in that same chair but feel nothing. Those men are often in pain, not in peace. And that pain deserves attention, not a philosophy. What we're actually talking about is something more nuanced. The growing number of men who, after separation or divorce, or simply a long stretch of living, make a deliberate and fairly clear-eyed choice to stop organising their lives around the pursuit of a romantic partner, and who, in doing so, seem to come alive in ways they hadn't expected. Why does that happen? What's driving it? And is it healthy? Let's go carefully. Reason 1. The identity renovation. For most men who came of age in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, identity was something built largely around roles. Provider, husband, father, the guy who kept things together. These aren't bad roles. They gave meaning, direction, structure. But they're roles. And when those roles end, through divorce, through children leaving home, through retirement, there's a period that psychologist Erik Erikson called generativity versus stagnation. It's the life stage question that arrives somewhere in mid to late adulthood. What have I actually built? What am I still building? Am I contributing something? Or am I just maintaining? Many men hit their late 50s and realise for the first time with any real clarity that they don't know who they are outside the roles. That's uncomfortable. It's disorienting. And the instinct can be to immediately refill that void with a new relationship, with distraction, with busyness. The men who instead sit with that discomfort, who go through the slow, sometimes awkward process of figuring out what they actually value and enjoy and want, those men often emerge with a much stronger sense of self than they had at 40. And a strong sense of self, interestingly, changes what you're looking for in another person. It raises the bar considerably, not out of arrogance, out of clarity. Reason 2. The nervous system has had enough. This one is physical as much as psychological. Sustained relationship conflict, and many long marriages carry years of unresolved low-grade friction, takes a measurable toll on the body. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, chronic low-level vigilance, that constant monitoring of the emotional temperature in the room. After years of that, when the relationship ends and the conflict stops, many men experience something close to physiological relief. The nervous system finally downregulates, sleep improves, digestion improves, the persistent low-grade tension in the shoulders starts to ease. When your body has spent years in a state of quiet emergency, peace doesn't just feel emotional, it feels physical. And the prospect of re-entering that kind of friction, even with someone different, can feel genuinely threatening at a body level, not just a preference level. This isn't weakness, it's biology. It's the autonomic nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do, avoiding environments that have been associated with sustained stress. Understanding this matters because it means some of what looks like not wanting a relationship is actually not wanting to go through that again, which is a different thing, with different implications. Reason 3, time has become visible. At 35, time feels abstract. You know intellectually that it's finite, but it doesn't feel finite in your bones. There's always more of it somewhere ahead. At 55, something changes. The horizon is visible, not close necessarily, but visible. And that visibility changes decision-making in profound ways. Researchers who study this, and the work of psychologist Laura Carstensen on what she calls socio-emotional selectivity, is worth looking up if you're curious, have found that as people perceive their time as increasingly limited, they tend to shift their priorities toward what they find genuinely meaningful. They become less tolerant of relationships that feel draining or dishonest. They become more deliberate about who they spend time with. For many men, this shows up as a quiet but firm pruning, not just of romantic relationships, of friendships, of obligations, of commitments that have been carried out of habit rather than genuine want. What's left after that pruning often looks, from the outside, like less, but from the inside it tends to feel like more. Reason 4, the renegotiation of vulnerability. Men in this culture are given a complicated relationship with vulnerability from very early on, and many men arrive at their late 50s having managed intimacy in a particular way, connecting emotionally, but only to a point, letting people in, but not all the way in. After a divorce, or after a long marriage that was loving but finally honest, something can change. The armor gets examined. And what some men discover, sometimes with a therapist, sometimes just through the slow work of solitude, is that the version of intimacy they'd been offering wasn't really full intimacy at all. The renegotiation isn't "I'm done with closeness." It's something more like, "I'm done pretending that what I was doing was closeness when it actually wasn't." And the men who do that renegotiation honestly, who actually face what they were and weren't able to offer, some of them become more capable of genuine connection than they've ever been. Some of them eventually do partner again, and do it in a fundamentally different way. And some of them discover that deep friendship, meaningful community, and a relationship with their own interior life is genuinely enough. Both outcomes are legitimate. The key is honesty about which one is happening. Reason 5. The social permission has changed. Worth naming plainly. 30 years ago, a man in his 60s who lived alone and seemed content about it was more likely to be viewed as a cautionary tale than a model. There was social pressure, from family, from peers, from cultural expectation, to be partnered. That pressure has softened. Not disappeared, but softened. And for some men, what looks like a choice was partly always there, waiting for permission. When the permission arrives, it can be mistaken for revelation. It wasn't a new self. It was the same self, finally allowed to surface. Scenario 1. Martin, 63. Martin was married for 31 years. His marriage wasn't a bad one by most measures. He and his wife raised 2 kids, maintained a house, held together through job losses and health scares. They had real affection for each other, but somewhere around year 20 they'd stopped growing together. They became very good roommates, functional, respectful, almost pleasant, just not intimate, not in the way that makes a marriage feel like a marriage. When his youngest left for university, his wife told him she wanted a divorce. He was stunned, even though some part of him wasn't stunned at all. The first year was rough. Martin threw himself into his work, then into the gym, then briefly into dating apps, which left him feeling more disoriented than before, like he was trying to solve an emotional problem with a logistical tool. Somewhere in year 2, he stopped pushing. He started running. Slowly, in the early mornings. He started seeing a therapist, initially reluctantly. He reconnected with a close friend from his 20s who lived 2 hours away. He got a dog. By year 3, something had settled. Not closed, settled. He had started to understand what the marriage had been missing, and he had started haltingly to develop those parts of himself that had never been exercised. He became a better friend than he'd ever been. He became more patient with his adult children. He started taking photographs on those morning runs. Nothing serious, just noticing things. He isn't against partnership, but he's also not chasing it. He describes his life now as unexpectedly full. That phrase came from him, not from a podcast. Scenario 2. David, 57. David's marriage was different. There was real conflict. Not always explosive, but persistent. Disagreements about money, about parenting, about priorities. His wife had her own complicated history, and so did he, and they'd never fully worked through either. When it ended after 22 years, there was grief, and there was also, quietly, relief. Both things at once. He didn't know how to hold that. His relationship with his 3 children became strained. His ex-wife was navigating her own anger, and the kids were caught in the middle of that for a while. David made some mistakes in that period, withdrew too much, communicated badly, was slow to take responsibility for his own role in the marriage's patterns. What changed things for him was a weekend he spent helping a friend gut and rebuild a barn. Manual work, physical exhaustion, almost no talking. He came home and felt something he hadn't felt in years, useful in a simple, direct way. He started volunteering as a handyman for a local charity that refurbished homes for elderly residents. 1 day a week, then 2. He wasn't looking for purpose, he fell into it. The relationships he built there were some of the most honest of his adult life. David did eventually reconcile with his children. It took time, consistency, and a fair number of conversations where he sat quietly and listened to things that were hard to hear. He's not reconciled with his ex-wife. They're civil, functional, separate, and he's at peace with that. He told a friend recently, "I spent 40 years managing how I was perceived. Now I just try to be useful." That shift from performance to contribution is what peace actually looked like for him. If you're somewhere in this transition, here are 8 things worth considering. These aren't prescriptions, they're starting points. 1. Build a morning routine that belongs entirely to you, not optimized, not impressive, just yours. Whether it's coffee and a book, a walk, 15 minutes of quiet before the world starts. The point is to begin each day from a place you've chosen, not a place you've stumbled into. Over time, that simple anchor does more than it has any right to. 2. Do an honest audit of your friendships. Not a judgmental one, a realistic one. Which relationships actually involve 2 people showing up? Which ones have you been coasting in for years? Deep male friendship after 50 is underrated and often underinvested. It takes real effort. It's worth the effort. 3. Clarify your financial picture, even if it's uncomfortable. Separation reshapes finances, sometimes significantly. Many men in this stage avoid looking too closely because what they see is frightening. But making peace with the actual numbers, with what you have, what you need, what your realistic future looks like, is foundational. Consider speaking with a financial advisor who has experience with post-divorce restructuring. Clarity, even unwelcome clarity, is better than fog. 4. Move your body in a way that doesn't feel punishing. Not to look a certain way, not to compete, just to maintain the machine that everything else runs on. Walking works, swimming works. Whatever you'll actually do, consistently, without dreading it. 5. Establish relationships with your adult children on new terms. The parent-child dynamic shifts after a family restructures. Your children are watching how you navigate this. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be present and honest. Regular, low-pressure contact, a meal, a phone call that's actually about them, matters more than grand gestures. 6. Find something that requires your complete attention. A craft, a project, a skill you've always meant to develop. Woodworking, language learning, cooking. The point isn't achievement. The point is the specific relief that comes from doing something absorbing enough that the mind quiets. It's a form of meditation that doesn't require sitting still. 7. Be deliberate about your living space. Many men in this stage inherit a living situation, an apartment or house that was chosen for different circumstances. Your space doesn't need to be beautiful, but it should feel like yours. Small changes in how a space is, organised and what's in it, can have an outsized effect on how you feel waking up in it. 8. Consider therapy or counselling, seriously, not as a last resort. The men who navigate this transition most gracefully are often the ones who have an honest, objective conversation partner. Not to fix what's broken, but to understand what happened and what you actually want going forward. If the word therapy carries weight for you, try talking to someone. It's the same thing. Here's what needs to be said plainly. Not every man who is choosing peace is choosing wisely. Sometimes what's called peace is actually fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of failure, fear of being known and still found wanting. And fear dressed up as preference is still fear. It just has better posture. If you find that your peace is primarily characterized by relief, that no one can get close enough to hurt you, that's not liberation. That's armour. Armour that you may have needed once and may no longer need. Some separations with time and real work are recoverable. Not all of them. Probably not most of them. But some. And before a man concludes that peace means permanent solitude, it's worth asking honestly, have I actually done the work that would make me different in a relationship? Or am I just avoiding the exam? Reconciliation, whether with an ex-partner or with the possibility of partnership more broadly, requires real change, not better performance. It requires understanding your patterns clearly enough that you can genuinely interrupt them. That's hard. It takes time. It can't be rushed. If the relationship that ended had real love in it, alongside the dysfunction, and if both people have done genuine work since, the possibility of rebuilding isn't naive. It's just difficult. Difficulty is not a reason to abandon something. It's a reason to approach it more carefully. Growth after separation looks like increased self-awareness, increased capacity for honesty, increased tolerance for your own discomfort. It does not look like improved dating skills. Know the difference. There's a particular kind of afternoon light that happens in late autumn, lower in the sky, softer somehow, a little gold at the edges. Things look different in that light. Not diminished, actually more clearly defined. Shadows that were vague become specific. Colours that were washed out in summer brightness come through. A lot of men in this stage of life are moving into something like that light. The loudness of building a life, the urgency, the ambition, the performance, softens. And what's left, if you've done some of the harder interior work, is something with more texture. Less motion, but more meaning. Fewer people in the room, but more genuine presence from the ones who are there. This isn't about giving up on closeness. It's about getting honest about what closeness actually requires, and whether you've been willing to offer it. Some men in their 60s find partnership again and find it transformed by everything they've learned. Some find that a life organised around deep friendship, meaningful work and genuine solitude is more than enough. Most find something in between, a quieter kind of connection, with fewer expectations and more actual honesty. All of those outcomes can be good. None of them are guaranteed. What matters is that the choice is made with open eyes, not out of exhaustion, not out of fear, not out of a story you're telling yourself to avoid the harder look inward. If you're in this transition right now, if you're somewhere in the middle of figuring out what your life looks like on the other side, I hope something in this was useful. Not a roadmap, Just a companion thought for the walk. If it landed for you, leave a comment, not a reaction, a real thought. What you're navigating, what you figured out, what's still unclear. Those conversations in the comments tend to be some of the more honest ones. And if you know someone who's in this, a father, a brother, a friend navigating a quiet kind of reckoning, this might be worth sharing with them, not as an answer, just as company. Take care of yourselves. See you in the next one.